I'm standing here in Washington, D.C., at the capital of our nation, but also where some of the most important research is done for transportation. TCRP, the Transportation Cooperative Research Program, part of the National Academy of Sciences. We're standing on the roof of the building. We just wrapped up an amazing panel that you're going to want to listen to today because we recorded it for a live podcast. This is a look at what research is being done across America through the TCRP program in cooperation with APTA and the FTA to look at the latest technologies that are improving the customer experience. We have some great panelists on today's program. Take a listen to this and you'll come away not only educated, but also deeply informed about how we can really improve public transportation and the customer experience using technology. All on today's episode of Transit Unplugged. Hey, great to see everybody. I'm Paul Comfort and very excited today to do a live podcast. We're excited to be here. You know, and I'm from the local area, so it's fun to be here for that as well. I've spent a lot of time in D.C. The 1950s were really the heyday of public transportation in America, right? It was the end of World War II, and all the guys were coming back from the war, and they were guys. My grandfather was one of them. The women had entered the workforce, really for the first time en masse in America during the war. My grandma worked in a bomb factory in New York during the war, and so the men came back, got jobs, the women were already working, and there wasn't very many two-car households then, right? And so suddenly, mass transit in the cities became very big, very popular. It was the heyday. Everyone was riding. I've got statistics on a presentation I do, but it was a lot of Americans are riding public transportation around that time in the 1950s. And then, they were the happy days, right? Everyone was making money, the economy was going great, and people started to get a car, and then a second car. And by the 1970s, public transportation ridership had gone down quite a bit because people were getting that second car. They didn't have to ride the streetcar. A lot of cities had streetcars. My city that I was CEO of in Baltimore, a lot of the bus routes were still following the old streetcar routes right to the downtown area. And that's the way it is in a lot of cities. I was just in a city recently. They said, oh, come, we want to show you. Here's our streetcars from the 1950s. The rails are still on the ground. Scott Bogren told me from CTAA there was a way you could actually ride streetcars like from the east coast of New York all the way through to the middle of the country just by jumping from one to another. There was that many. Anyway, the 70s came and ridership plummeted. And remember, most of the time these public transportation companies, and they were companies, were run by the private sector, and they were not subsidized transportation. They were making profit. A lot of them were run by utility companies, right? They would sell their power, electricity, to vertically integrated to their own subsidiary who was running the streetcar. I think there's still one left that way, maybe two in the country that are run that way. But as a result of ridership going down so much, the fare box revenue went down, and these companies decided we can no longer provide this service at a profit. And so many of them, almost all of them, sold their assets to government. Some of them went belly up. I remember when I got to Baltimore as the CEO, I remember some of our older drivers would say, we still call us the company, the bus company, because they still remember that. Their dad worked at the bus company, they work at the bus company. But the government took over in the 70s, and we had a good 40-year run. Public transportation, we had a monopoly on mass transit in most cities for about 40 years, from the mid-70s to around 2015. I know that because I was working in the industry for most of that time, for 30 of those years, actually, and worked my way up in the industry and management and business development and transit agencies. I worked right here in Washington, D.C. for 5 years, responsible for the day-to-day operation of the WMATA Metro Access Service, the paratransit system, and then was selected by Governor Hogan to go and run the MTA, the Maryland Transit Administration, which is a statewide agency, but my day-to-day responsibilities are really as general manager of the 11th largest transit system in America there in Baltimore. But then I remember when it happened. You might remember too. Around the mid-teens, Art will remember, Uber came in, right? Lyft, these other companies came in, for-profit providers. Companies were coming in and dumping bikes and scooters all over our streets at cities across America. You remember that when they first came in? They were everywhere. I remember being in Memphis calling Gary, saying, Gary, CEO, there's a up in the tree, I see a scooter. You got to get this under control in the city, man. So they came in, and public transit agencies, really for the first time, as we lost what we used to call our choice riders at the time, we really had to focus on something that, in my opinion, had not been a primary focus, and that was customer experience. We really started focusing in the mid-teens on, we got to get these, our ridership really started to plummet. And you might remember there was a 7-year decline in ridership. And I remember Art being at the APTA CEO panel in Orlando around 2016 when everybody's hair was metaphorically on fire saying, what are we going to do? We've had a 5-year drop in ridership. Our funding agencies, the local governments, et cetera, that bought up all these assets back in the 70s, they're looking at us, they're saying, why should I give you more money for less passengers? What are we going to do? And I remember Nat Ford, who was our chair that year, came out and said, we need to take an expansive view of transit. We're not the only providers anymore. We are no longer the monopoly. We need to engage the private sector and become an aggregator of public transportation, take some of the best practices we can from them, and mold kind of a macro system of public mobility in our cities. And that's when customer experience became integral. That's also when transit agencies really doubled down on technology and said, we need to get the latest software, we need to make ourselves accessible to the public. We want to not be opaque. We want to have them see that they can have a great experience on our service. Fast forward now, 10 years later, and we've got a great panel assembled to discuss what we're doing right now. TCRP and TRB have been at the forefront of researching some of that technology. We want to talk about how that works. You've heard some of it today already, but we also want to talk about how it's impacting the industry and what we can look forward to going forward. So let's welcome our guests here today. Let me start here with Matt Daus, my friend, who's going to kick us off. Matt, give us a quick intro of yourself and what you do and your role with TCRP.
All right. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Happy TCRP Day. I now know where to be on every October 1st, Gwen, so thank you. And also, I'd like to, during your opening remarks, Gwen, you talked about your home, right? So, first of all, Victoria, thank you for welcoming us into your home at TRB. And I'm a lawyer. Transportation found me. I didn't fight transportation, I'm really a musician. I ended up working for the government for 20 years. I became the longest serving taxi commissioner. And now worlds are colliding with my friends in public transit because all the things we're talking about with TNCs and these outside folks are part of what we're going to talk about today on my end with some of the work we've done for TCRP. But I love the home analogy, Gwen, because if I really had to just sum it up, public transit agencies are insular. You have your vendors, they sell you stuff that you use, but my involvement with TCRP and some of the issues from my world, which is regulating the TNCs and the taxis and where they fit in, and even the scooters. You're inviting someone into your home and someone needs to stand at the door and, it doesn't have to be a lawyer necessarily, but they need to basically make sure they don't steal the silverware, who's on the guest list, And you get a little nervous, you're inviting folks in that, the lawyers sometimes get in the way. They're trying to be helpful and do their job. But the reality is, Paul, is that, you can't do that in the innovation field. If you're going to actually get involved in emerging technologies and bringing them into transit, whether it's software, whether it's first and last mile partnerships, wheelchair access, supercharging the brokerage relationships with paratransit, the future is an ecosystem. And I think most folks in public transit are there. They understand how important it is. So I guess I'm the evangelist on the legal for-hire side, and how do we effectively partner with public transit and make it work and minimize risk. And that's what I'm here to talk about today.
That's awesome. Matt, I want to congratulate you, Matt. If you don't get his newsletter, it's a great source of what's happening in the industry. I encourage you to listen. I read it every day.
And it's free.
That's free. That's right. Yep. So great work, brother. All right. Next, we go to Art Guzzetti from APTA, the American Public Transportation Association. He is Vice President of Mobility Initiatives and Public Policy and is a standard bearer in our industry. Highly respected. Welcome to the panel, my friend.
Thank you. And looking at the audience, I think this is a Friends of Art lunch here, right? This is all good people here and in the audience. So, and I'll mention, Gwen, Victoria, Miriam, TCRP alumni, Chris and Stefan, and the APTA team. Team APTA is here as well. And Paul, I will say that it gives me great comfort to be with you. So, you've heard that one before, maybe, huh? But no, I'm Art Guzzetti, APTA's long-serving right team, long-serving Vice President for Policy and Mobility. But long career in transit. I worked for transit agencies for the first half of my career. Founding member, charter member of New Jersey Transit. I'll tell you the stories about that later. And also worked for Pittsburgh Regional Transit, my hometown. Not only now at APTA, but very involved in TRB. We have something we'll talk about later called the TOPS Commission, which APTA is centrally involved with, which is a little bit the trilateral partner along with FTA and TRB in managing and delivering TCRP.
Excellent. Thank you, Art. We're in Washington, D.C., so it's great to have a representative of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority here. Sarah is an important player at WMATA. She's the Chief Customer Officer, and so it's a very important role. I emailed Randy this morning and told him we were going to be on a panel together. Take us and tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am the customer advocate and I speak for the millions of riders that interact with our system every day. I do what I can to try to reduce the complexity and the friction and the great amounts of information that they need to have in their heads to navigate our system effectively and easily. I did not start in transit. I started in marketing and advertising in New York, then went to crisis communications, and then was brought in. Does anybody remember the Summer of Hell? It's an awful term, but in New York, when there was a convergence of a lot of construction activity happening, and Governor Cuomo at the time decided to exude a lot of his control and authority to make some significant changes with regards to how the MTA operated. And one of the things he did was bring on Andy Byford to come lead New York City Transit. And he had hired me to be the first chief customer officer at the MTA. And that wasn't an easy role. I remember walking into my first meeting. I was the only woman of an executive team of 14. I was a young mom at the time, and a lot of meetings happened after 5 p.m., right? We think about how much this industry has changed over the last 5 years, and I credit leaders like Andy, leaders like Randy, to be able to bring in different points of view and allow more care and thought to happen around not just moving vehicles, but moving the people that are on the vehicles and reducing as much anxiety as possible that people might feel, both from a safety and security perspective, but also from a wayfinding and information perspective. So part of, one of my strengths and weaknesses is that I feel a lot for everyone, and I'm just really privileged to be able to represent so many people who use such an important system every day.
Excellent. Thank you. We are going to be taking questions at the end around 2 o'clock. So as you're listening to the panelists and you think, just write it down and you'll be ready to go by the end of the show at 2 o'clock. We'll have a time for you to do that. All right, let's go to Jamaal Schoby. He is the Senior Program Officer here at TCRP. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jamaal? Let's just jump into the first question. Tell us some about the program.
All right, good afternoon again. Jamaal Schoby, Senior Program Officer here with TCRP. I just realized that I just made 20 years in the public transit arena, and I have been working with TCRP almost my whole professional career. So I think I'm at this age where I can start doing storytelling. So I just realized that I learned about TRB and TCRP through my old college roommate and then the former TRB executive director, chair, Dr. Carol Lewis at Texas Southern. And there was this scholarship called the Dwight E. Eisenhower Fellowship that pays for you to go study a master's in transportation planning. And they pay you tuition, stipend, and your kind of reward or get back is you have to come present your research as a graduate student at the TRB annual meeting. That was my first time attending a TRB annual meeting, presenting research as a young 20-something-year-old graduate student, very nervous. But actually, it was my first time being exposed to TRB, and everyone, I'm pretty sure, has been to a TRB annual meeting. Not as intimidating as APTA, but I would have to say it's very intimidating when you're fresh into your career and don't know anyone. So with that, throughout my whole career, I have pretty much used TCRP's research in one shape, form, or fashion. As I served as a transit consultant at various agencies, as I served working at public agencies, and also worked as a TCRP ambassador with Peggy over here at APTA, where I had the opportunity to go to conferences and disseminate and talk about and promote the TCRP research. It was like Paul mentioned during that era of emerging technologies, about 2014, when I was working at the MBTA under Dr. Beverly Scott, that I got introduced to like Uber and Lyft and all of these emerging technologies, and obtained an opportunity as a millennial, I want to kind of use the app to call a ride in public transit. So what is TCRP? What do I do at TCRP? So at TCRP, I am a senior program officer where I work with the TCRP team, our TOPS commission, where we identify research needs, and we meet every year, actually coming up here in October, later this month, it's October now, later this month, and we are going to meet with transit leaders from across the nation. It's a governing body of about 32 transit leaders, and we're going to go through and identify research topics that will formulate next year's research program. You've heard me talk a lot about emerging technologies, but we also have research needs on automation, bus network redesigns, cybersecurity, and whatnot. So once the research projects are selected, they're then going through the process of approval by TRB, and myself and my other colleagues, as senior program officer colleagues, we, based on our subject matter expertise and our likability, get a consortium or a portfolio of research topics, where we then go out and leverage our network to identify subject matters to serve on our project panels of about 8 to 10 persons who I direct the research, and they provide the subject matter expertise throughout the research project. Probably the funnest part is getting the proposals and selecting contractors. It's a couple of hours session where we go through and identify some contractors that we think will be the best fit to conduct the research. And then we let the selected contractor go on their way and conduct the research for us for the next 18 to 24 months. And then voila, you'll see the product, not printed anymore. We just did that today for a special occasion, but everything is online electronically for the array of research topics.
So as we mentioned, we're recording this for a Transit Unplugged podcast. Our podcast is normally, it is an interview with a CEO or a top executive of a transit system somewhere around the world. Once in a while, we bring somebody in who's not a CEO if they're really, really great, like Matt. Matt's a two-time guest. And people who are influencers who can bring us and tell us things that probably CEOs aren't going to want to say, people who can be really honest. So he also is very involved with TCRP. And you've actually been the PI on a couple recent projects that explored the intersection of emerging technologies and legal issues as a lawyer for transit agencies. Can you tell us some about them?
Sure, Paul. And first of all, we talked about the home analogy, strangers coming into your home. I mean, nothing happens unless you have to go through hell to get to heaven, right? You have to have some disruption. These reports are mindful of that and the role that lawyers play, because lawyers are usually there either to say yes or no before you do something in government and in the private sector, and also to clean up messes, right? So, Sarah, I'm glad you brought up, the whole summer of hell thing, because I lived through it myself. I'm from New York. We wouldn't have congestion pricing now if we didn't have the summer of hell. Okay, and Andy Byford's great. He's my law partner, Tony Kosha, is running Amtrak. He's like a survivor. I mean, he's been around for, I think he may hold the record along with Art and I in staying in one place for the longest period of time. And Andy's now back with him, and people cross-pollinate NAT4. People just fly over the country, around the country, and give their experience. But one thing is certain is the lawyers that usually come to public transit, they stay usually in one place for a while. They get in the position where it's easier to say no as opposed to saying maybe or yes. And there's two reports that I was honored to work on. I have a lot of research that I do policy-wise. I'm Transportation Technology Chair at the City University of New York, UTRC Region 2. But what I love about TCRP is that we've been getting some work to really take the transportation law that I've been practicing pretty much for 30 years now and be a resource to folks. I mean, I teach non-lawyers at the City University. And it's a fun thing to be able to actually explain regulation to them because it's a different world. And I think these reports are not just a roadmap for I think they were originally intended for general counsels at public transit, right? But it's also for the program managers and the people that are making policy decisions and CEOs, as well as for the potential vendors. The world changed when the FTA did their sandbox program. And it has led to great experiments in mobility as a service, transit partnerships, first and last mile, wheelchair access brokerage program. One of the proudest achievements I have is putting the first brokerage program in place with Lee Sander at MTA, which has now saved probably hundreds of millions of dollars for public transit agencies around the world. Well, there's two important reports here that if you haven't seen them, they're outside and you can get them from the website. The first one we did a few years ago called Legal Research Digest 59, which is for legal issues in emerging tech. Now, this covers everything. So if you're an agency and you're looking to basically do something with autonomous vehicles and partner with them, or if you're looking to get new software or do something where you're putting multiple outside vendors onto a platform to do first and last mile, you're looking to redo your centralized dispatch system for paratransit. This is a roadmap of issues, legal issues, almost like a checklist for everything that lawyers and people that are doing the planning and the research of what could go wrong, and also to provide you a pathway to actually figure out how we can go from A to B and to cover these issues and address them head on. And we did a recent one that just came out called Legal Research Digest 61, Transit Agencies Providing or Subsidizing Innovative Micromobility Projects, Legal Issues. So it's a little more of the same, and it raises all the legal issues that you should be concerned with, whether you're doing business with a transit agency or you're working with one, when you're partnering with bikes and scooter services for first and last mile. And we need to be cognizant that this is the future. The future of public transit is an ecosystem where these partnerships need to be supported, and that we need to make sure that the agency's protected. And if I had to sum up the key findings, I would say, Paul, that like I said, bringing someone into your home, bad stuff could happen, right? You're bringing an outside entity, not just as a vendor, but to provide mobility services on behalf of the transit agency. So the big issues are always that we cover here is there's ways to protect yourself and to protect your agency as a lawyer. And this has happened with all these partnerships that we talk about in the report. You can have an indemnity from the first and last mile partner. You can make sure that they cover the lawsuits and they defend the agency and take the responsibility, that they procure the insurance. Another concern is cybersecurity. I mean, it's happening more and more frequently that there are cyber attacks. The more folks that public transit bring into their IT system and partner with, the more chances and risk for hacking into those systems and to having privacy information spilled out into the open and creating liabilities. And last but not least, the biggest issue, it's kind of obvious, is people get injured. This is the single most thing on folks' minds. Something bad happens with the driver. Okay, you have a bad driver who commits some illegal act, is driving while intoxicated, gets into a crash, and people get killed. And I used to be a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. I'm not proud of that. I did it for a little while. They sue everybody first and ask questions later. So the transit agency is going to get sued, and then you have to go through the option of, making the motion. So this is a checklist, really, for you to look at these issues and address them. The Americans with Disabilities Act, everything is covered in here, and it allows you to do the vetting that you need and provides a pathway forward for agencies to partner.
So these are the documents. This is the type of studies that TCRP is doing. Now, you mentioned, Gwen, or somebody mentioned you want to get more downloads and more people reading this. So I'm like the P.T. Barnum of transit, So let me make a suggestion. TCRP Research Digest 59, maybe an SEO optimized title. Which is messing with you. I know what you're doing, but anyway, great work, brother. And now, Art Guzzetti. So APTA is super involved with this, as is FTA, in putting these documents out. You work with the TRB and TCRP. Tell us about that nexus.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to underscore the overriding theme here, and that's that we're operating in an ever-evolving mobility landscape, and that's part of what TCRP helps us do, helps us understand, helps be a guiding light as we operate through transitions, transformative times. One other comment I'll make too is, I know Victoria, a couple years ago, TRB had its 100th anniversary, and I used that occasion to talk about value from TRB, and I underscored the cooperative research programs, NCHRP, TCRP, and the others. And TCRP came to be through the ICE-T law, Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991, seeing that there's research done, but is it connected to the practitioner? Is it connected to the problems, the near-term issues we face every day? Where are you getting the input from that? Shouldn't there be some process that helps the industry itself determine the needs and prioritize the needs? The things that we need to face as transit practitioners. That led to the TCRP program, begun in 1992. There was a report that led to that, a TCRP special report, Research Needs for Public Transit, New Directions. Before that, I will say, as a historical note, there was something called the Transit Development Corporation. And so this is pre-1991. I know I'm going back a ways. To me, it's not that long ago. But basically, the industry would get together and say, what kind of issues do we need to research? What can we pull together? We're not everyone going to have their own research program. We need to collaborate nationally on what we can do together on research. And TDC produced priorities and then pitched for funds wherever they could get it. TCRP program put a little formality into that process and made it more sustainable. It's a trilateral relationship. TRB has the highest standards on conducting research in a pure, practical, and impartial way. So TRB is the implementer. FTA, Congress provides the funds for TCRP, but it's through the FTA budget. So FTA is the stewards of those funds. And APTA's role is to convene the TCRP Oversight and Project Selection Commission. That's what I referred to earlier as the TOPS Commission, where again, that's where we gather practitioners covering the whole diversity, the big tent of the transit community. Perhaps I could talk about that later if I have a moment. Helps identify the problems where we need a better understanding, problems we are facing, how might research provide, as I say, the guiding light. So that's it in a nutshell.
It's great. So it's a great three-legged stool with all of you working on these technology projects. One of the great technological advances I think that's come about in the last 10 years is what was initially called contactless cards, and now they're called tap-and-go payment cards. I remember 2016 being at, Sarah's talking about Andy Byford, I remember being at TfL, and Shashi Verma was the CTO then, the Chief Technology Officer, and he said, Paul, I want to take you down to the tube right now. He said, I want to show you all something we just started 6 months ago. They were the ones that kind of kicked off these tap-and-go credit cards at Transport for London. So we went down, and we just saw all these people going by, taking their wallet, not even the card out, and tapping it. And he said, in 6 months, we have 40% adoption. Amazing. People love not having to have, it's an Oyster card there. In Baltimore, we had the Charm card. Everybody has their card, their name for it. But it was phenomenal. And it's kind of taken over the industry as another way to improve customer experience. So Sarah, can you talk to us about some metrics that show tap and go has improved the customer journey, such as speed at gates, first-time users, reduced cash handling?
Sure. We were fortunate enough to launch Tap Ride Go on rail earlier this year, and excited to launch it on bus shortly. I think it has been a huge relief for customers who are especially tourists who have had to engage with, we call them the refrigerators, right? We're all aware of the very large vending machines that we have in the system that are older than I am. And that interaction that customers have as a result of using Tap Ride Go has been, it has allowed us to start experimenting with things like fare capping and other types of incentives to get people riding more often. What I think we are not discussing enough as an industry is the transaction fees that are as a result of Tap Ride Go. And other, Omni has the same issue. I'm not going to name names, but the transaction rates for transit agencies are not widely discussed. We do not have enough information from our peers to be able to come together as a consortium to try to bring those rates down. That's something that I think will hurt our bottom lines moving forward. It is much easier. It is where we want to go. But as we see these overall topics around wealth and the corporatization and privatization of banks, and more fees going to those organizations and institutions instead of public transit. That's something that I hope and wish that we talk a little bit more about.
That's great. Jamaal, what's another example of how TCRP research has made a difference in our industry?
Yes, I would say probably microtransit, as I was looking at this morning, trying to see what are kind of the most research that's been done kind of at emerging technologies. It's microtransit. We have a growing catalog of microtransit projects since 2019 that is very impactful for the agencies. As the past 10 years, agencies are trying to figure out how to integrate these microtransit services into their systems, whether it be serving as a first mile, last mile connector, urban settings, and now into the rural neighborhoods. So to date, we have a catalog of 4 microtransit research projects that have been undertaken with various kind of angles. The first one is kind of right before the COVID era, kind of surveyed the land and looked at the kind of the state of practice for microtransit services and trying to get a feel for how agencies are using microtransit. Then we had a project that was just released this year on more of how agencies are addressing certain nighttime services, which is a hot topic around the country as well, where traditionally Uber and Lyft have been kind of that late night service provider for the late shift workers. But we produced a report on nighttime service, and one of the elements looked at microtransit and how microtransit can be used across the nation to serve late night service industry workers. Also, another one is commingling with ADA paratransit services and microtransit services is another research that was published this year on kind of the microtransit umbrella, kind of looking at how agencies can improve their operational efficiency with commingling of ADA paratransit services, which is the law, and kind of on this on-demand microtransit services. And also, keeping in that microtransit umbrella, actually May of this year published the first microtransit study that looked at how can the rural community, I know sometimes the rural community kind of feels like they're forgotten about, but so someone submitted a research topic a couple years ago, so now we've published the first research on how microtransit can be deployed in rural America.
One of the other kind of customer experience improvements that I think has happened in paratransit and in fixed route transit over the last 10 to 15 years is the expansion of contractors, TNCs, transport networking companies. You just mentioned 2 of them, Uber and Lyft. There's a couple others, Userve and Silver Ride that are doing national trips. Actually, Art and I just did a panel together at APTA's conference in Boston last week with some of the larger contractors. You may be familiar with them. There's an organization called the North American Transit Alliance, which represents the 6 largest contractors. They are companies like Transdev, Keolis, RATP Dev. Notice they're all French, those first 3. We Drive You, and MV Transportation, the one that's owned here in America, and Beacon. I'm actually the executive director of that association, and so contractors have moved in to play an important role, and they a lot of times subcontract, Matthew, so like Transdev might subcontract to Uber and Userve to help provide paratransit in a city. And then you've always got the old fallback, which we've always used, which is taxi cab companies. When I was here at WMATA, we had contracts with Red Top Cab and other cab companies, Regency, to help provide overflow service for paratransit. What's some of the current regulations you've seen on that? Where is that going legally?
It's all over the place. It has been from the beginning. I mean, I guess I had a free ride when I was taxi commissioner because Uber wasn't created back then. But when I left, quickly it became a massive disruption event. And I'm also president, Paul, of the International Association of Transportation Regulators, which is an international group of those state and local entities that license and regulate not just transportation network companies, but buses and micromobility, as well as taxi cabs, of course. Art's been on our board for over 10 years. And when this all started, we had a major fight with a lot of the TNCs because some of them weren't following the law and their old leadership. And the law evolved and they went above the locally. Traditionally, taxi cabs have always been regulated locally. And what they did is they went around the country, hired a lot of lobbyists, spent a lot of money, and basically passed state laws, which are a self-regulatory model, which is different from the history of taxi regulation locally, where you'd basically have to go in, be fingerprinted, You can't put a sticker on the back of a taxi cab in New York City without getting a fine, but so there's less regulation, and it's self-regulation, like the Federal Motor Carrier Administration regulates interstate buses and trucks, where like drug testing and hours of service, you basically have to just do what the law says, and then like the IRS, they'll come in and audit you. That's kind of what the model is, and it's a huge disparity from how taxis are regulated, and this has had meaningful impacts on public transit in many ways, because the TNCs, their business model with independent contractors, Paul, they were not set up to do wheelchair access, so they couldn't get a lot of these folks who were just getting regular insurance, taking their cars out of the driveway and doing gig work. They couldn't get them to buy wheelchair vehicles. So what happened? The taxi industry ended up doing it. In Seattle, for instance, part of the compromise when they passed the law in Washington was to make sure that the taxi industry gets paid by a fund that Uber and Lyft paid into to put wheelchairs on the road. And if it wasn't for the paratransit programs or transit agencies, the taxi industry would not exist at all anymore, because they have the inventory for wheelchairs, and that has kept them alive, because the street hail is dead outside of New York City. And things have evolved. And the regulations, Paul, to answer your question, was set up so that the TNCs, it was almost impossible for people to pay the fees to even get a license, let alone the insurance. It was created to separate them. And I almost fell off my chair a few years ago when I found out that after all the battles we've been through, regulators and private and the former incumbent industry against the TNCs, now they're mainstream, and now they want to work with the taxi industry. And this happened in the non-emergency medical transit, Medicaid reimbursement, people going to hospitals and dialysis centers. That federal money has fueled many contracts with the taxi industry when Uber and Lyft tried to get into that industry, as well as Via, UServe, and the other folks that you mentioned. It's not just about public paratransit. What fueled their partnership together, with the taxis, they didn't have the wheelchair vehicles. So now they want to work with their nemesis, and now we're trying to figure out how do we make these laws which are designed to separate them and give an advantage to one over the other. How do we take those partnerships that are like either direct or subcontracts with the folks like Transdev and MV, how do we make that work? So this has become more complicated, and unfortunately, it's hard. They're trying to do workarounds with pilot programs, but there's no way to avoid the fact that we're going to need wholesale state legislation to fix this mess that we're in, and that's not happening right now. The pilot programs in New York and Texas and Los Angeles and San Diego and San Francisco, I believe, they're all like pilot programs. But to get to the next level, because these services need to work with each other and with public transit, and it's an evolving mess, is what it is, and we're trying to clean it up. But there's ways that we suggest in the report that the agency can protect itself. It's all about risk mitigation. You want to do something, figure out a way to do it, and just palm off the responsibility on them. They're big companies. They got a lot of money. They're more than willing to do that to get the business if they can scale it.
It's actually a great segue to the question for you, Art, which is, so the process is designed with the TOPS group to make sure you're identifying current issues like he just talked about and doing some study on it. How does that work?
Yeah, and thank you, Paul. And at the risk of sounding institutional to talk about that, I do want to be very transparent about this, to explain a little bit about the TOPS Commission and how it works and how projects are selected. First of all, the TOPS Commission, the group that actually reviews, selects projects, is by its bylaws has to be holistic. It has to cover all the bases. We talk about the consultants, private sector, transit agencies, universities, systems, big, small, medium, rural, labor, other national organizations, state and local governments. So the board has to cover all those bases, check all those boxes. Also, it has to have all the disciplines represented. Well, topical areas. We have to make sure we have people who know finance. We have to have people who know accessibility, planners, legal, operations people, maintenance people, workforce, accessibility, technology, all of those bases. So it's hard to actually put it together. Having said that, it's extremely competitive to get a seat on there. There's a nominating committee that has to screen as many as 150 applications for just a few seats. But it is open to everybody. So I do want to make that clear, and we encourage people to become involved. The process is there's a solicitation. Every year there's a review, nominations process, a selection, an election eventually. And those that are not selected, we encourage to be involved in other ways, to be involved in panels, to be involved, many ways to be involved in TCRP. The final thing I'll say on that is, okay, then what happens? Okay, so we have to oversee the projects. So you award a contract, you still have to make sure, is it achieving all its goals? Is it being done in a way that's most impactful? So there's an oversight role as well, and there are metrics to determine how we're doing, and there are dissemination. In the end, it's only as good as it's used. So we make sure that it's used. So I just wanted to cover all those bases, make sure, Paul, that was part of our conversation, sort of the process kinds of points.
A couple days ago, I was in Canada near Toronto moderating a panel of Canadian transit leaders, and I was happy to see that one of the CEOs, she said that we're undergoing a bus network redesign in our city, Hamilton Street Railway, which is all buses, by the way. They kept the name from when they used to have streetcars. But so Sarah, everybody's doing that, right? It's a hot thing. We did one round back in the mid-teens, which was led by Houston Metro when they did the first kickoff of a bus redesign. And now there's another round post-pandemic where transit agencies are saying, hey, travel patterns are different. A lot of cities are still kind of in that 3-day work week. So what advice would you have for people who want to do that? Another really customer-focused innovation that's happening.
Sure. I think the first thing that you need to have before you embark on a bus redesign is courage. It is an incredibly challenging experience to go through. My first was on Staten Island. My second was Bronx. My third was the DMV area. Learnings from each one of those. Some were more successful than others. The more feedback and community involvement that you have, the better. The more ridership and mobility data and cell phone data that you have, the better. And the more research you have, the better, obviously. At the same time, I think that the right approach is to do small redesigns in smaller areas and segments, one at a time, to allow bus operators to be trained, to allow the signage to be right, the maps to be redesigned. However, when we did that in New York, we got stopped, we got stalled. Right? And what I loved about WMATA's approach was we're just going to do it all at once. We did it, right? Which is great, but we still have a ton of education to do and a ton more work to do to make sure every route is correct. And right now, we still have improvements to make. So that's what I would, say from my perspective. And it's really amazing to see how much bus transportation matters to communities. And I wish that more people would care about it as much as the people in this room do. And I was really surprised in the DMV area how few people came to our board meetings to talk about it. Maybe we had one person come.
Wow.
In New York, 90 per meeting. And that public process, that public input process, the 90 that came to speak really did influence the outcome. We did not have that same kind of interaction in the DMV region. We did go out. We did a ton of outreach. We did 350 community events, not to mention just bus ride-alongs, and tried to pull as much information from people as possible. But something that I wish that we all had more time and capacity to motivate our community to be more involved in.
Maybe you answered all their questions in those 350 meetings. Jamaal?
If I may, Paul, to do a quick TCRP plug, we have a new bus network redesign study that we're about to kick off here. So that's a good segue. It's going to examine bus network redesigns throughout the nation, where we will survey about 25 different agencies that have done bus network redesigns, and then do some case examples of 5 of those agencies. So we're just kicking that off here in the fall, so that should be on the street for publication either the end of next year or the beginning of 2027.
Did y'all enjoy this conversation today? I've got a lightning round where I'm going to ask each of them to do a 30-second answer, and we'll wrap up with that. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe to our podcast, Transit Unplugged. It's, as I mentioned, it's a weekly show. It's free, and it's a great way to get educated on what the latest trends are from the different CEOs we talk to. Also, I wanted to make you aware we have a television show, an actual, real, live TV show that I host and produce called Transit Unplugged TV, and it is a travel show. Think Anthony Bourdain meets public transit. We go to a different city around the world every month. We just did Italy. 2 weeks ago, we were in Italy doing Rome, Milan, Florence, and we show you all the food, fun, and culture, and then we show you the public transportation system in that city and how to ride it like a local. So when you go to that city, you can ride. We also, on this ride, had the 3 major high-speed rail companies in the area, host us on there, show us how high-speed rail works. It's going to be phenomenal. That's going to be our Christmas show. For December. So it's on YouTube. That's where the best place you can access it. It's on cable TV all over the country. We just got picked up this week at a big channel in Miami who's going to start airing it. They actually downloaded all 36 of our episodes, and they're going to start playing it. So it's kind of exciting. It's an on-ramp to public transportation for the average person to showcase to them, oh, yeah, I haven't really, because as you know, only 5% of Americans ride public transit unless you're in New York City, basically, or Chicago, one of the big cities. So it's a chance for people to understand how it integrates and empowers communities. All right, last lightning round of questions. Matt, what's the single biggest legal or regulatory hurdle that an agency should anticipate when adopting emerging technologies that we've been talking about today?
That's hard to do in 30 seconds. But what I will say is that there are actually 3 hurdles. Okay. The first one is the easiest. That's risk mitigation for avoiding lawsuits, believe it or not. That can be accomplished by insurance agreements. The 2 biggest ones we haven't spoken about, Sarah mentioned data and procurement. In terms of data, this is the problem when you're partnering with folks. The freedom of information law, federal and state, the second public transit gets their hands on a piece of data, I've published articles and textbook chapters on this. It is out there, and it actually had a chilling effect on the FTA sandbox program for a year or 2 because it took forever for the lawyers to negotiate agreements with the transit agencies. And I was fortunate enough to work as a consultant for LADOT with Professor Susan Shaheen and some others for LADOT on the MDS project, the mobility data specification. The answer to overcome that hurdle, a result of that work has led to Mobility Foundation, mobility data. Nonprofit entities are not subject to the FOIL law. Even universities, as long as they're not public universities, so I'm shooting myself in the foot here. You're better off keeping the data on their servers and pulling it. And last but not least, Paul, procurement. This is the single most, if I had to pick one problem here, because when you're dealing with innovation, look, I put the credit card readers and the GPS and the first set of data in taxi cabs. I got protested. The people were calling for my ouster because they felt I was picking on the cab drivers. But it was revolutionary. But I knew we didn't know what we were doing, number one. Number 2, there wasn't a product out there that we wanted to put this system together. So what did we do? We used the RFI process and something called new innovative procurement rules that New York City has, which exist in a lot of different procurement rules around the country. SAMUSA and the bus shelter contracts, that was the first one. We were the second under Mayor Bloomberg to do that, and it worked because we called everybody into the room. We had informal conversations with companies, and they left the room after we told them what we wanted to accomplish, partnering with each other, and then we did the RFP. That's what we need to do here, or we need to work with economic development agencies, like Michigan has an EDC, where they can have a little bit more flexibility, because these folks that are innovating, they're not used to this government procurement thing. They feel it's, they may have a good product, a good idea, but they're not in the know because they don't have a track record of working with transit agencies. Break down that process and communicate with them. It can be done. Use the RFI process, use your innovative procurement rules, and don't go into the process of setting yourself up for failure by saying, I think I know everything about what I'm asking for, and putting out an RFP and realizing after it's out there that it's a disaster and it's taking forever. In addition, of course, to speeding up procurement processes, which is an overwhelming thing that's not going to happen overnight. But you could probably work around it a lot, and our reports at TCRP cover all these topics. We talk about the data sharing issues. We talk about this. So, it's all in here. If you have a couple of drinks on the beach, this could make for good reading.
That's great. I agree with you, by the way, on those topics. It's very good. Art, if there was one single TCRP product you could point to for people in the industry, what would it be?
Yeah, I want to underscore a report that Jamaal mentioned earlier, and it's titled Planning and Operations Initiatives to Support Nighttime Transit Ridership. We're talking about the 9 to 5 economy, people. 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., right? That's the 9 to 5 economy I'm talking about. But there are workers there, workers that need ways to get to work, employers that need ways for their employees to get to work. There are restaurants that a transit might be the difference between that restaurant closing at 8 o'clock or staying open until 11 o'clock, right? The vitality of cities comes with nightlife. Matt and I have worked on these things together. So I would say figuring that problem out, not figuring out that issue, how we can better serve the 9 to 5 economy will help us. It's not all about the other 9 to 5 economy anymore. It's about the new 9 to 5 economy in part. Thanks.
And also, I just want to point out, like the whole big events thing is an outgrowth of that. You know,
That's right.
FIFA and the Olympics are. So we should do. That's a great area for us to delve into for a future TCRP report.
Absolutely. Sarah, from WMATA's perspective, how can you name one like big change riders have actually experienced with new technology?
Sure. I think our customers have been great. They've had a lot of benefit from our enterprise video program. We have about 30,000 cameras in the system, and those cameras have been extremely helpful in driving down crime. And our safety, security, and perceptions of safety and security have really gone up significantly. And I think that our video program, even though customers might not see, feel, and hear them, have been sort of the backbone of what has been driving safety and security. Personally, you know, I love our real-time digital signage. I think that has been trying to get as much of that in the system as possible so that people know and can plan when their vehicle's arriving or if they're not because of planned work. That's something that really focused on and in expanding. And the last thing, you know, I would say is that I would really love us to just find a way to build levitating buses. That would really just, we could just figure that out, and we would definitely drive a lot more ridership and get people to where they need to go faster.
Maybe we need to amend our report to put flying taxis in there for transit partnerships.
Buses, but sure.
All right, Jamaal, bring us home. What current research is TCRP conducting on emerging technologies that you want to tell us about that you haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, so I think we've talked in nauseam today about emerging technologies, but yes, just to drive home, stay plugged with TCRP through our listserv, the website, to see about some of the new research on emerging technologies that is coming down the pipeline. Pretty much Microtransit, we pretty much, I think, almost put that a nail in the coffin with that one. Automation, a lot more automation, connected vehicles is coming out, AVs, how agencies are using their AV shuttles. So more research coming down the pipeline on that. We talked about cybersecurity. A lot of agencies are dealing with cybersecurity attacks, so needs some research on how to prevent cybersecurity attacks and develop incident recovery plans. And my favorite, AI. Like I mentioned, we have our first research undertaken with AI this year, and I presume there will be a lot more research over the years to come on artificial intelligence as transit agencies start to adopt AI and learn about more machine learning.
It's wonderful. You know, the industry we work in is, I think, one of the most fascinating industries that you can work in, period. I've heard it said that new technology in transit is second only to the medical field and all the new technologies that are coming into play. And so I think we've had a great panel here today to discuss not only the research that's being done, but also, as Sarah's mentioned, some practical implications of that on the industry. What we do every day moves millions of people and gives them access to all of life's opportunities. The work we do is important, and the work you do in helping to research and operate transit systems is integral to making sure that our society functions and that people can access all opportunities. As I mentioned, I'm a big passionate believer in ensuring that people with disabilities get access to all of life's opportunities. They're the ones, in my mind, that need it the most, and so we need to do our utmost to give them the best service we can, and not just see ADA paratransit as an also-ran, it costs too much. No, these are the people that we really need to put on a pedestal and serve them the best we can. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much, TCRP, for putting on a great day today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's #1 transit executive podcast. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of the podcast. Many thanks to the team that makes this show happen. Host and producer Paul Comfort, producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, associate producer Cindy Raskin, and consultants Dan Meisner and Jonas Woost at Bumper. Transit Unplugged is being brought to you by Midaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. If you would enjoy behind-the-scenes insights and updates from the show, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has links to can't-miss conversations with the biggest names in mobility. Head to transitunplugged.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Transit Unplugged.